Hey, YouTube, and welcome back to a new video with Rams Fan YT. In today's video, we're going to go through my predictions for this week of upcoming fixtures. We've got some Champions League games around the 16 first legs. Got some interesting run-ins till the end of the season starts pretty much now, I would suggest. But we're hovering around about that 10 game mark in a lot of the up and down the EFL at the moment. So that is very much where I am anticipating for us to, for every point essentially at this stage of proceedings to count. We are going to start off with tonight's game in the Champions League of Galatasaray versus Liverpool. I think the Turkish side could maybe cause an upset at home. I doubt they get through on the second leg, but I think maybe they edge through at home 1-0. I've just got a sneaky suspicion that maybe Liverpool think this is a bit of an easier tie, so don't go full force at it. So yeah, Atletico Madrid versus Tottenham Hotspur. Spurs are a mess in the domestic league, in the Premier League, and there's no doubting about that. But actually in the Premier League, they've in the Champions League, they haven't looked too shabby, and I think they're going to be well up for this game and win 5-1, which feels absolutely crazy to suggest of Spurs right now. But it just feels like one of them games that Spurs could somehow pull a result out of absolutely nowhere. St James's Park got Newcastle United versus Barcelona. I think Newcastle were probably dreading the hardest draw I think that you could have probably wanted. And I suggest that Barcelona will probably edge out this one 2-1. Sorry, Geordies, but I don't think you're probably going to get through to the quarterfinals, really. Leicester City versus Bristol City. Starting off domestically in the Championship. And we're talking about a struggling Leicester City side. I mean, that is very much... They need to take some of these opportunities. 10th place Bristol City. A bit of a far cry now for them to be able to get into the playoffs. It will probably peter out to roughly that 10th, 11th place. And I suspect Leicester could actually edge out a 1-0 win in this one. Millwall versus Derby County. I'm a bit worried about this one. Millwall did a very good job up against Hull City last weekend, and they're in third place and they're wanting all the points they can get to try and get into that automatic zone at the moment. Remember, it's 10 games left for both Derby and Millwall. We are decent away from home. I mean, I suspect now we probably finish more like 7th. I struggle to see us mounting that gap to be able to actually get into the playoffs, but you never know. I'm going to go with a 1-1 draw in this one. Very cagey game. Portsmouth versus Swansea City at Fratton Park. This is going to be the scene for this game, and I've not been impressed really by Swansea a lot. They managed to eventually beat Stoke City 2-0, but that's partly because Stoke went down to 10 men in their last game in a weekend, and there's not really been anything which has inspired a great deal of confidence for Swansea this season for me. Portsmouth, well, they're probably going to be able to stay up. They're 5 points clear of the relegation zone at this point. I mean, we've got a few games in hand over all the teams beneath them as well. Yeah, I suspect that Portsmouth actually, for some reason, run out 4-0 winners here. Sheffield Wednesday versus Watford. It's that every single week now we're just asking how many is the real question of how badly defeated Sheffield Wednesday get. And up against a Watford team which still have aspirations, I would assume, of reaching the playoffs. I think Watford absolutely demolish them in an enthralling 6-2 win for Watford, but probably not what Sheffield Wednesday fans would be wanting to hear. Wrexham versus Hull City. Now, this is good for a Derby perspective, because if Derby managed to get somehow past Millwall, we'll probably be able to gain points on... Well, we'll definitely be able to gain points on at least one of the two teams above us. I think this is going to be a fantastic game for the neutral to watch. Real end-to-end riveting stuff. I've gone with a 3-3 draw at the Racecourse Ground. Stoke City versus Ipswich Town. I think Stoke just need to go a bit back to basics, and I think they might do that in this one. They don't score a lot. They're one of the lowest scorers actually in the division, relatively speaking. I think they probably grind out, but they don't concede a lot either. They've actually got in the top 4 of the best defences in the league. I'm going to go with 0-0 draw here. I think just have a feeling that Man is going to keep Ipswich out at the back, but just not score going forward. Barnsley versus Cardiff City. Obviously, last weekend was that absolutely amazing game between Lincoln City and Cardiff City, and inflicted defeat against Cardiff City. They've had a couple in the last 3 games now, and it's Lincoln City's title to lose at this point. And I certainly think Cardiff aren't going to give up without a fight up against the Barnsley side, who, let's face it, haven't got really much to fight for at the moment. They're banging mid-table in 12th. That's probably going to be roughly where they figure out and land at the end of the season, that 12th, 13th place mark. 1-0 to Cardiff City. It's going to be a very narrow game. Doncaster Rovers versus Luton Town. Luton haven't won a game in the last 5, and I suspect it might be longer, as I think Doncaster probably come out of the traps and manage to get all 3 points in this one. I've gone with a 2-1 win to Doncaster Rovers at the Keepmoat Stadium. Exeter City versus Lincoln City. A lot of draws of late for Exeter. No wins, but 4 draws in the last 6. And maybe they could get a point off Lincoln City and draw 0-0 is what I've suspected to happen in this one. Obviously, Lincoln fans will be hoping for a win, but it's always a long trip down to in midweek down to St James's Park in Exeter. Yeah, difficult one. Mansfield Town versus Reading. Disappointment for Nigel Clough's men in their game against Arsenal on the weekend, losing 2-1. And I reckon they could have probably forced it to extra time, really. But you just got to look at Reading at the moment. Top-notch stuff. I reckon they probably get playoffs. Realistically speaking, they are a strong team and are bearing down a lot of the teams above them. Only 1 point off of playoffs now. And up against a Mansfield team who's sort of faded away a lot recently in the league, down to 16th. I think it's going to be a large 5-1 win for Reading in this one. Stevenage versus Leyton Orient. They're fairly decent form of Stevenage in right now. So you will probably not be surprised if I said for a Stevenage win, but I think Leyton Orient managed to force a draw in this one. 0-0 is my prediction for this game. Wigan Athletic versus Plymouth Argyle. Wigan have managed to get themselves back out of the relegation zone. They've managed to sort of change things around with the appointment of Gary Caldwell, of course, formerly of Exeter City. He sort of changed the fortunes around slightly. And, I mean, getting a point from here, I suspect, is going to be the end result, 1-1 draw. It's a difficult team to face up against Plymouth, who have had 4 wins in the last 5. I think Wigan could probably get a draw out this one. Barrow versus Bristol Rovers. A bit of a relegation, scrapping points here. Bristol Rovers are probably safe, I will say that. They're in 20th now. Barrow in 22nd. And you know what? They're just outside in goal difference out of relegation zone, and they need to get something from this. They have a couple of games in hand above Newport County, who is the team directly below them. I suspect they get a draw in this one, which I think is one of their games in hand. A 1-1 draw in this one. Fleetwood Town versus Cheltenham Town. Fleetwood have been in some impeccable form of late. I mean, Cheltenham's not been in bad form either. They're 5 games unbeaten. It's just 4 of them are draws. Whereas Fleetwood, they're much more consistently picking up points at the moment. Probably too little too late to be able to mount a charge for the playoffs, and therefore will have to suit themselves for a mid-table finish in anticipation for next season. But yes, in this particular game, I'm saying a 2-0 win for Fleetwood Town and continuing their really strong performances that they've had of late. Gillingham versus Milton Keynes Dons. Gillingham are a really odd team. They're currently in 16th. I mean, sometimes they're really top-end stuff, really good League Two teams. Sometimes they're just bang average, and this is one of their bang average seasons. But they do just occasionally drag out results up against some of the bigger teams in the division. And one of them ones is definitely MK Dons, who 5 points off the top of the league. They still definitely have that as an aspiration, I would suggest. But I think maybe a 1-0 win for Gillingham. I just think they nick it at Priestfields at home. They'll be treating it like an away game, just somehow get something from it. Salford City versus Walsall. Salford in 6th, Walsall in 11th. This is normally about the time of the season where Walsall suddenly start waking up, realising that they're slipping down a bit too far. They're 3 points off the playoffs, and if they can suddenly start getting a consistent run of games and performances going, Walsall could definitely get back into contention for the playoffs. It's just whether they can or not. I think actually for tonight's game, they may make a solid start for what it will be a good run of form till the end of the season. 2-0 to Walsall. I mean, you're looking at Salford. They've lost 4 in the last 6 games in the league. It's not the greatest of form, is it, really? Neither side is, though. Aldershot Town versus Carlisle United. Disappointing 2-2 draw for Carlisle in their last game up against Southend United. And that's sort of been a bit of a story so far of the season for Carlisle, as they're looking desperate to at least manage to get that position in the top 3 to make sure they don't have to play off in the quarterfinals for the playoffs. But it's difficult, and especially with Boreham Wood, who is now resurging a bit. And you know what? Aldershot not long ago were on a fairly good run of form. They've had a couple of defeats since then, admittedly, but still on a relatively speaking good run of form. And I think Aldershot still get past them. I think they win this one at 2-0. Eastleigh versus Brackley Town. Eastleigh, well, they're a bit of a mess right now. They got rid of their previous manager. Was it a controversial decision? I'm not too sure at the moment. There's a lot of conversations. Still not appointed a permanent successor at the moment. Brackley, well, they've lost 5 in a row. You would start questioning at this moment in time whether Brackley are going to sack their manager, purely because they don't want to end up getting sucked down into relegation. I do rate Andy Wing, don't get me wrong. Andy Wing, he used to be at Solihull, didn't he, as manager? For a couple of seasons. But I think it's difficult. He's got a difficult task on his hands to turn this side around. Because at the moment, it's quite a sticky situation. It is the highest they've ever been. But do they want to be like a one-season wonder in the National League and then just float off into obscurity? I don't think so. And up against Eastleigh, who are just above them in 19th. And Eastleigh aren't out of any danger right now. I think Brackley could get something in this one. I've gone with a 1-0 win to Brackley Town. The Battle of the United of Scunthorpe United versus Sutton United. I'm sure all the teams below Sutton are hoping that they get absolutely walloped by Scunthorpe. Not convinced that's going to happen. Scunthorpe haven't been pulling up any trees, in my opinion, recently. They'll have done enough to get into the playoffs, but it may even just be in that 7th place mark, which is always a risky one to be in. I'm going to say this is going to be a 1-1 draw in this one, because, as I said, Scunthorpe haven't impressed me that much of late. Southend United up against Gateshead. Neither has Southend been overly impressive. A couple of draws in a row now, but you know what? There's been some real determined battling performances from Gateshead of late, haven't they? Really look like they could actually pull off the miracle. It's still one of them ones that I'm not going to say it yet because there's still lots of concerns that I have over how bad they were throughout this season. But you know what? Elliott's done a decent job at turning this around, and I'm going to go 3-1 to Gateshead in this one, continuing their great run of form. They've only had 1 defeat in the last 6 games now. Solid performances from the team in just south of the River Tyne. Wealdstone versus Tamworth. Yeah, Wealdstone haven't done great recently. 16th. Tamworth lost the last couple, but they're still in 10th. Still a decent outing from the side. I don't think anyone really expects them to be much higher than that. And I suspect we'll have a very close game. I've gone with a 1-0 win to Tamworth in this one. They don't score a lot, but when it comes to it, they could manage to get something in this game. Woking versus Boreham Wood. Woking have also got rid of their manager. Interesting decision, I will suggest. Getting rid of their old manager. They haven't really currently got a replacement in line. And I mean, the thing is, Woking have a high aspiration. They've got a very high ceiling. It's very congested mid-table, really. From Tamworth in 10th down to Yeovil in 17th. There's only 4 points difference. It's very congested mid-table, as I said. It's switching week from week. I think it comes to me as a little bit harsh. I think that's fair to say. And I actually think Boreham Wood do win this one. As I said, they're resurging fourth. They're doing a decent enough job now and probably get playoffs at the end of the season. I can't see them dropping anywhere near enough points to make them fall out. 1-0 to Boreham Wood is what I've gone with. In the National League North, we've got Alfreton Town versus Radcliffe. Alfreton have lost a couple of games in a row now, but maybe they get back to winning ways in this one. Still, let's not forget that they have 4 games on hand in Oxford City and 5 games on hand in Bedford Town. And to overtake Oxford City, they only have to overcome 3 points margin. It's not that difficult to do that. And I think Alfreton actually start tonight up against Radcliffe with a win. Radcliffe have lost the last 3 in a row. They've dropped out of the playoffs accordingly. Might be the perfect time to face Radcliffe for Alfreton's perspective. 2-1 to Jake Buxton's men. Come on, Alfreton. Bedford Town versus Worksop Town. 18th versus 19th. 1 point is all that splits them in these 2 games. So either way, drop points. And I'm still hoping against hope that Worksop get relegated in this situation. And, well, I'm going to have to therefore say it's a long trip down to Bedford for a lot of these teams. Even Worksop, which is in the Midlands, relatively speaking, closer. It's still a long way. I'm still going to go, I think Bedford are in a bit better form. 2-0 to Bedford Town at the Airy. Chorley versus South Shields. Chorley's a really odd team, aren't they? They're in 14th. There's not a lot going for them at the moment. I think it's going to be hard for them to be able to get anywhere near that playoff positions, but maybe they can have still got to say. South Shields now that comfortable 4-point barrier, and I think for just entertainment purposes, I'm going to say it goes much tighter down to the wire. 2-1 to Chorley in this one, although in reality, I think we'll probably see South Shields win. Curzon Ashton versus Oxford City. Well, South Shields' opposition last weekend was Curzon Ashton, who were defeated 3-0, it's worth saying. And that makes it 3 games in a row that Curzon Ashton have lost. They look a bit lost without cause, really, at the moment. Curzon Ashton, I normally expect to be much higher up there, you know, teetering on the edge of that playoffs, a bit like Spennymoor, about 8th, 9th place. But yeah, they're currently a bit lower than that. They're playing against Oxford City, who I want to lose just so that Alfreton can stay up. So yeah, we'll go with a win for Curzon Ashton here. 1-0 to Curzon Ashton. Not a hugely pretty game by any stretch of the imagination. Darlington versus Buxton. Buxton haven't been on a great run of form. Only 1 win in the last 6 games now. And their season, I think, is effectively over in terms of anything of importance. I mean, it's a safety season. I think a lot of people probably would have suspected that they would have made a bit better of a go at trying to get to the playoffs. But alas, they haven't. Darlington, talking about playoffs, are just hanging in there in 7th, a point above Macclesfield, but 2 games played more. It's kind of a must-win, I think, for Darlington in this situation. but I suspect it might be a 1-0 win to Buxton in reality. AFC Fylde versus AFC Telford United. Yeah, Telford are a decent team, they really are, and 10 points off the top 3. Could they make it? Ultimately, I think if they beat Fylde, then I wouldn't write them off. If they lose or draw, then probably we'll have to settle for playoffs. And I suspect Fylde do win this one. They're at home and they're needing to get at points. They've had a couple of disappointing results. The draw against Leamington and the loss against fellow title challengers South Shields has seen them fade away a bit. I've gone with a 3-1 win for Fylde. Hereford versus Leamington. Hereford are back at Edgar Street. Apparently, that's the news coming out of the club today. And you know what? I think the fans will be absolutely delighted, especially seeing that up against Leamington, who, let's face it, Leamington are going to be relegated this season. There's nothing in my mind that could make me say anything other than Leamington be relegated. Hereford have a ton of games in hand, and Aaron Downs as the manager. Now, it is worth just mentioning about Aaron Downs. He hasn't had a ton of experience. So he really is going to say a lot if he manages to get Hereford out here. But with 6 or 7 games in hand, depending on which team you're looking at above them, it should be doable. They're also hitting a decent run of form. Yeah, 3-0 to Hereford in this one. Kidderminster Harriers versus Peterborough Sports. 5 defeats in a row for Peterborough Sports. They've seen a bit of a rearranging of the deck chairs, maybe rearranging the deck chairs on Titanic, if you will. Phil Brown, their manager, has now been moved to sporting director or something like that. Effectively, they don't think he's doing a good enough job on the ground. And it's just odd because, Phil Brown, very experienced hand. If you think about it, he was with Kidderminster last season, and I think a lot of people were surprised when he left to go to Peterborough Sports. They've instead appointed Michael Gash as their manager. His experience, not much. It was with Peterborough Sports for a couple of seasons, and then he left and he's come back again. But yeah, he isn't a great manager, I don't think, Michael Gash necessarily. I don't think that's much of an upgrade. And I think Kidderminster Harriers, surely, with their 5 games unbeaten, 3 wins in a row, they've got to win this one, surely. 3-0 to Kidderminster Harriers. Marine versus Macclesfield. Macclesfield need to start getting some wins, don't they? Marine's an odd team. I can never quite place my finger on them because sometimes they do pull up some great results and sometimes they're just bang on average, if not terrible. I think we're going to have a Macclesfield win 2-1 in this one because they need to keep on getting points as well in order for them to get to the playoffs because they're currently not in them. Merthtown versus Chester. Chester got rid of Callum McIntyre. And I think they've been doing decent enough form at the moment, Chester. Whereas Merthyr, they're really hit and miss. You don't quite know which Merthyr team's going to turn up. I've gone, therefore, with a 2-2 draw in this one. Scarborough Athletic versus Kings Lynn Town. Maybe for some reason I've gone with a Kings Lynn to manage to force a draw up against Scarborough. Just a 0-0 draw. Dead, dire football sort of game. I just have this niggling feeling that could potentially be how it pans out. Southport versus Spennymoor Town. Now, we know Southport have been on some fantastic run of form. 5 games unbeaten. And Spennymoor, well, they got rid of Graham Lee and sort of coasted a bit recently. They're in mid-table in 12th. Not a great position for them at the moment to be in. But maybe up against, Southport are 16th for a reason. I've gone with 4-1 to Spennymoor Town, which is probably quite a crazy thing to say, but just have a hunch that Spennymoor could get something from this. Bath City versus Farnborough. Bit of a scrappy game down towards the bottom end of the league, National League South table. 20th place Farnborough versus 21st Bath City. Really, I think whoever wins this probably comes out staying up at the end of the season, I would suspect. I think Bath do just about stay up. They've got a couple of games in hand on Farnborough, 4 games in hand over Hampton Richmond Borough. Bath should be able to stay up, is what I'm saying. And I think in this one, a low-scoring 1-0 win for Bath City, which will not be too bad. Dorking Wanderers versus Chelmsford City. What a win, by the way, for Chelmsford in their last game. What was it, 7-1? Something like that. Absolutely carnage result. And have made themselves definitely likely to get into the playoffs. I still think Maidstone might be one to actually catch up at 7th place. But it is sometimes a bit of a humbler, though, isn't it? You sometimes have this, they're up sky high and then they get a bit humbled because they get carried away above their station. And let's face it, it's a difficult game up against top of the league Dorking Wanderers. Dorking aren't wanting to let up anything. I think it's going to be a 2-2 draw. I know Chelmsford are the best team in the division on form at the moment, but you never know. You never quite know. I mean, Dorking are up there for a reason. Dover Athletic versus Tonbridge Angels. Bit of a local rivalry of sorts. They're both in Kent, aren't they? 16th versus 17th, points separating them. I would naturally probably say a draw in this one, but I've actually gone with a 2-1 win for Tonbridge Angels. They've had 3 wins and 4. Decent enough form. Yeah, a win to the Angels. Eastbourne Borough versus Ebbsfleet United. Let's see if Paul Caddis's team can actually manage to throw it wide open. I'm really loving the National League South for the last couple of seasons now, actually, because Eastbourne are now bottom of the league, but they're 3 points off safety with a better goal difference than Farnborough. It's going to go right down to the wire. It really is. Ebbsfleet, they're in 4th. You know, they've sort of emerged out of absolutely nowhere and managed to get into the playoffs. And I think Ebbsfleet win this one. An end-to-end ding-dong-do 3-2 win for Ebbsfleet United in this one. Hemel Hempstead Town versus Chippenham Town. Hemel Hempstead have won back-to-back games. They're going to be looking to try and consolidate their place in the playoffs with only 39 goals scored. And you're telling me that team is going to get into the playoffs. Absolutely ridiculous. They're the 3rd lowest scorers in the league. Absolutely mental to think about that, isn't it? But their defence of 38 goals conceded is up there as one of the, I think it's 4th best in the league. So really solid defensively. Going forward, not as much. But I don't know. I've just gone with a 4-2 win for Hemel Hempstead. I know you look at Chippenham Town, they seem to be picking up a bit of form. And if they do stay up, it'll be truly the story of the century. I kind of want Chippenham to stay up just for that fact, you know, that absolutely mental position that they looked so cut off, so down and out. But it would be mental if they managed to win it, but get out. But you never know. Football is a weird thing, especially National League South football. Horsham versus Hornchurch. Horsham bang mid-table, 14th. Not a lot to write home about. I'm going to say that. They'll probably finish around about that 13th place mark anyway. Can't see them getting much higher than that. Hornchurch will at one point were top of the league, 2nd place for. Still reasons for that. They may not be pulling up trees week in, week out anymore. But I still reckon they win this one. 2-1 to Hornchurch in this game. Maidstone United versus Dagenham and Redbridge. KSI's new club. He's taken over 50% controlling stake of Dagenham Redbridge as the side man. And you know what? It seemed to have a bit of energy. They got a 1-0 win in their last game against, I think it was Dorking Wanderers, wasn't it? And they're taking on Maidstone, another difficult challenge. Maidstone in 10th. It's still not impossible. I'm saying it now that Dagenham and Redbridge do somehow pluck out into getting into the playoffs. 6 points off the playoffs. Not completely unreasonable. They've got about 10 games left in them for Dagenham and Redbridge. There's variety, there's so much disparity across at the moment. But I'm going to go with another 1-0 win for Dagenham and Redbridge in this game here. Slough Town versus Hampton Richmond Borough. Slough are 4 games unbeaten, and I think for competitive reasons, I want Hampton Richmond Borough to sort of get dragged into it a bit. It makes things more competitive if there's a couple of teams which are catchable. So I think Slough, for this reason, is going to win 1-0. Torquay United versus Salisbury. Torquay are in 6th. It doesn't look like Neil Warnock's had the desired effect. They seem to be really, really coasting and may even drop out the playoffs at the moment, actually. Which at one point at the top of the league would seem absolutely mental to suggest such a thing. But ever since they reached that summit, they've been absolutely snowballing down. And it doesn't look like it's going to stop anytime soon. I think Salisbury could maybe get a point out of this. We'll go with a 2-2 draw. Weston-super-Mare versus ASC Towton. ASC Towton looking decent. 1 game, 1 loss in the last 6. Not bad. They've seemed to have regained a bit of form, which is good to see. Weston-super-Mare are in 11th. Only 1 win in the last 6. Meanwhile, Weston-super-Mare have sort of tumbled down a fair bit. They are, I think, at one point were top of the league. They have got a lot of game in hands over some of the teams around them. So can't really discredit them at the moment to say that they can't get back into playoffs, but they need to be consistent, and they're not at the moment. And therefore, I think Towton wins 3-1. Worthing versus Maidenhead United. Worthing, they are 3rd. I at one point said they're going to win the league, and I'm still thinking they're definitely doable. They are the top scorers currently in the league. Like, they do have that at their disposal, but it's a difficult game against Maidenhead, isn't it? Who are now in the playoffs in 5th. They've finally got their acts together, and I've been saying for a while it looked like they were going to be in the playoffs. Still thinking they're going to get in the playoffs, maybe even into the top 3 at this point. It's really congesting up there. So yeah, 1-1 draw in this one. On to the Wednesday night games. Got Bayer Leverkusen versus Arsenal. And maybe Bayer Leverkusen can get a draw out this one. I've gone with a 1-1 draw. Arsenal have a lot of fixtures still to play between now and the end of the season. And it hasn't having that sort of rough effect on the club. You can see they've been a bit shaky in a few performances. Paris Saint-Germain versus Chelsea. I think, PSG, they're the holders of the Champions League for a reason. And I think they win this one 2-1. We've got the likes of the Ballon d'Or winner Ousmane Dembele in the squad. I mean, I don't necessarily agree with that decision. It is a fact, but it's a decision I don't necessarily agree with. But they're a decent team, PSG. Arguably the 2 biggest clubs in the world right now, Real Madrid are taking on Manchester City. I think squad to squad, but these 2 teams are absolutely phenomenal. And I actually think Manchester City will win this one 2-1. I'm not going to reveal yet who I think go through out of these 2 teams in the second leg, but you'll have to wait for that prediction video to come out. But yes, I think at the moment, Man City are a strong team. And I think, they're out of a contention probably at this point to win the Premier League. Why would they not throw absolutely everything now at the Champions League? Birmingham City versus Queen's Park Rangers. Disappointing result if you're a QPR fan from last week. 4-0 defeat at the hands of Middlesbrough. I'd be looking for a reaction. They've only had 1 win in the last 5. The rest of them are all defeats. Something's got to change. And I think they maybe go back a bit to basics, bit defensive work. Birmingham City, they've lost 3 in a row. We're going to see a 0-0 draw in this one, which probably satisfies absolutely no one. Middlesbrough versus Charlton Athletic. Middlesbrough, they've still got that faint flicker of hope that they managed to claim the title, 5 points off it. It's a bit of a difficult mountain to climb. I think they'll probably be happy to just get that automatics, But yeah, 1-0 to Middlesbrough. They just need to make sure to keep on churning out the wins. Another Riverside up against the Charlton side, which haven't got much to play for anymore. But yeah, Borough are a logical answer for that. Norwich City, you flip Clements Norwich City with 4 wins in the last 5 games against Sheffield United, who have had a good resurgence. They're now up to 11th. They are getting the job done slowly. I think maybe we see a 1-1 draw in this one. Both teams didn't start the season overly well, but are beginning to find their feet a bit. Oxford United versus Blackburn Rovers. A bit of a relegation 6-pointer, really. Blackburn Rovers are 4 points above Oxford United, who have suddenly sprung out of nowhere with back-to-back victories. Now 1 point off safety. And I wouldn't be totally surprised if Oxford managed to pull off the great escape. I think at least one of Blackburn, West Brom or Leicester will go down, which is fairly obvious to say, because there is still a chance for Portsmouth go down, but I suspect not. So we're losing one of the really big clubs, which is in the Championship. I suspect West Brom at the moment, even though they have got rid of Eric Ramsey, the damage has already been done, in my eyes. And you know what? Because Oxford are in a better run of form, I'm going to go with an Oxford win. I've gone with 1-0 win to Oxford United. That will suddenly cause a lot of people to start panicking. I think a lot of people probably, ruled out Oxford of ever really getting back into it. But now, I'm not so much convinced. West Bromwich Albion versus Southampton. Southampton will be desperate to win this, and they're in supreme amount of form, joint with Coventry as the most informed team at the moment. And they are really, really strong, Southampton. But maybe the Championship's an odd game, and I think that West Bromwich Albion can get a point here. I've gone with a 0-0 draw at the Hawthorns. Probably still not going to be enough to see them dip into the relegation zone by the weekend, but even so. Coventry City versus Preston North End. Preston have just run out of steam. That's the only logical conclusion to make why they've dropped down to 13th. I mean, at one point being in the playoffs, looking really strong. And yeah, another win for Coventry, and Frank Lampard's men can go home smiling. 2-1 win for Coventry City. AFC Wimbledon versus Blackpool. Wimbledon are, they're occasionally picking up the wins here. They're just quietly going about it. Mid-table, 14th, and not a glamorous side by any way, but they're nowhere near threatened with relegation. Blackpool, however, 2 points above the relegation zone. Still very, very tight down in that bottom area. I'd say anyone from Mansfield Town downwards in 16th could get thrust into the relegation zone. So Blackpool need to make sure they win this, but I doubt they do. I think maybe Wimbledon at home, 1-0 winners in this one. Port Vale versus Bradford City. Great result for Port Vale on the weekend, wasn't it? Them defeating Sunderland 1-0. And that may give them a bit of a renewed sense of confidence. They've got 3 games in hand over Blackpool, right? So, and if they win all of them, then they're suddenly 2 points off Blackpool. It's not impossible, is all I'm saying, for Port Vale to pull off the massive upset. I think it starts now if they do. And they've, 3 games unbeaten in the league, actually doing quite a decent job, relatively speaking. And I've gone with them to win over Bradford City, who are a bit of an odd team this season. 2-0. Because Bradford seem to win up against the teams you don't expect them to win against, and then lose against the teams that you would expect them to be beating. Lille versus Aston Villa in the Europa League. Aston Villa just aren't on a great run of form at the moment, and Emery needs to sort that out. But I think Lille do actually win this one, 2-1. It does throw open a bit of a dialogue over with a home leg being the next one, but Aston Villa will definitely still be in it in the tie. They'll just have not got that goal advantage. Nottingham Forest versus Midgetland, or Midtjylland rather. Not Midgetland, imagine. They're all 3'2", and like Snow White's Seven Dwarfs from Denmark. But I actually think Midtjylland do win this one, 3-2. Hopefully they do. I'm hoping the Danish team knock out Nottingham Forest. That would be hilarious. Crystal Palace versus AEK Larnaca. I think the Greek side, I believe that's where they're from, Larnaca. And I think they could maybe get a 1-0 win over Palace. Palace seems to be utterly disinterested in the Conference League. I think that's fair to say at the moment. I think they only will really get interested if they manage to get through to like the semi-finals. But at the moment, they're just not turning up for games. Wrexham versus Swansea City. Hey, who do you think will win the championship this season and keep going? Thanks for that, Samsonamede. I think Coventry win the championship at the moment in time. It's a bit obvious who's winning the championship. I imagine that's what you mean as a championship in terms of the second tier. But yes, I suspect Coventry do. Wrexham versus Swansea City. So I don't think Swansea have travelled to the racecourse ground since the 1980s, if I remember rightly, while doing my research for this video. And that's a long time, and it's going to be billed as some sort of derby by, the likes of Sky or whatever. And it's not a local derby in any way at all. They're not even that close to each other. And it's not got anything actually riding on it in terms of local pride. And Wrexham need the points to get to playoffs. Swansea, it's a nothing game. I think Wrexham win this one 4-0. They maybe view it more important than Swansea. Colchester United versus Crawley Town. A bit of a mid-table game. I don't know why who's decided the TV games for this week? Colchester in 12th. Crawley in 21st. Okay, maybe Crawley are only 1 point per relegation zone, but that is a really odd game to decide to put on TV. Who was responsible for that decision? I do not know. But I've gone with a 2-1 win for Crawley because I think they need the points more. I think Colchester, I know they're 4 points off the playoffs now, but it's going to be difficult because there's a lot of teams, and other teams will also be picking up the same points up at the same time. It may only be 4 points, but there's a lot of teams between 12th and the 7th. So, yes, 7th place in the league. Burnley versus Bournemouth. Another long trip for Bournemouth fans up north. I mean, it's a price you pay, I suppose, for being in a geographically isolated area of a country. And Bournemouth have been doing really well, but no one's really seems to be mentioning, that 9th place. I mean, 4 points, they could get Conference League. That is all I'm saying. One of them teams, Brentford, Everton, Bournemouth, or Fulham, or maybe even Sunderland, at a push, but I doubt Sunderland will, may get Conference League this season. I suspect, Burnley, they're an odd team. They occasionally get some good results, but they've only had 19 points this season, and let's face it, they're not going to be able to stay up. It'd be an absolute miracle if they managed to stay up at this moment in time. They've still got a lot of games to play, actually, I think. They've got 13 games left to play. They've got more than everyone, all the other leagues, the Premier League, because of a weird way that the timetable, like the fixtures, come out. Anyway, easy win. I'm going to go forward Bournemouth here. 2-0 winners. Sunderland versus Brighton Hove Albion. I did the maths and I found out the last time that Sunderland went down to where Brighton's home ground was, they didn't even have it Amex at that time. I don't even know. Was it a Withdean Stadium? It may have even been before that. Last time I did it was when I was 8 months old. Therefore, in 2004, in October time, if you're trying to figure that out. So, yeah, that is like a long time since Sunderland made the long trip down to the Sussex coast. And I suspect that Sunderland get the win here. Brighton haven't been particularly great this season. They're only mid-table. They've not been, and not like upper mid-table as well, like 14th, just about treading water, really. That team, there's a solid point buffer between them and Leeds, but they're the bottom of that sort of mid-table runt between Bournemouth and Brighton, I think, which is 9th to 14th. So yeah, 2-0 to Sunderland in this one. Don't think it's an overly huge game, relatively speaking, though. Arsenal versus Everton. It'd be the most Arsenal thing to drop points here, wouldn't it? They're 7 points clear of Man City, although Man City do have a game in hand over them. I think they're probably in a bit of cruise control maybe in this game, and I think Everton could, as is Everton's style, manage to bruise out a 0-0 draw in this one, probably with some VAR controversy or something or another. Chelsea versus Newcastle United. Both of these two teams coming off midweek Champions League games. Chelsea, though, are performing much better in the league this season than Newcastle. I think that's fair to say. Newcastle in 12th. Chelsea in 5th. I still think they do get that Champions League spot in the top 4. And I suspect they win this one 2-1 at Stamford Bridge. West Ham United versus Manchester City. As much as I would love West Ham to win, and I really do, because I'd love either Spurs or Forest or Leeds to go down, and it could be any of them. They're not going to win every game, West Ham, between now and the end of the season. There's still another season to go, as I was mentioning earlier, that 13 games or so. They're definitely capable of getting out of relegation zone and throwing someone else in. But yeah, I think West Ham lose this one 3-1. Man City are just different gravy sometimes. Coventry City versus Southampton. As I was saying, Coventry City, I think, win the championship. I think fairly obvious on that one. There's 5 points gap difference and look pretty unstoppable. But I think Southampton might be able to. They're both the most informed team at the moment in the championship, and therefore I'm going to have to say there's going to be a point apiece, 1-1 draw. Both have done an incredibly good job of late in accumulating the points, though. Middlesbrough versus Bristol City. I think Middlesbrough are going to have another shock defeat. They've had a couple this season. I think it's the championship after all, and Bristol City might be able to bump themselves into a 2-0 win away from home. Crazy talk, maybe. Oxford United versus Charlton Athletic. Can it be 4 wins in a row for Oxford United? That would be quite something, and that's what I'm predicting. I think Charlton they're probably comfortable enough at the moment to think, you know what, they're probably not going to go down. And another win for Oxford. 2-1 to Oxford United. Birmingham City versus Sheffield United. 11th versus 12th. Too little too late for both of these two teams. Both of these two teams had probably too much expectation placed upon their shoulders at the beginning of the season. We'll go St Andrews to be the host, being a bit home advantage there, maybe. 2-1 to Birmingham City. Leicester City versus Queen's Park Rangers. When is the penny going to drop for Leicester? But they are very much in serious danger of being relegated. Maybe this week. And I think up against the Queen's Park Rangers team, which I'm going to say it now, they've not impressed me this season at all. They've got no flatline aspirations, just not been anything. 6-2 to Leicester City. Absolutely crazy game. Millwall versus Blackburn. Blackburn are struggling this season, and Millwall are quite the opposite, flying and getting wins after wins after wins. And I think they get another win here at the Den. 1-0 win for Millwall. Norwich City versus Preston North End. Preston may be mid-table, but they still can grind out results in the traditional Preston way. They're just one of them really annoying teams sometimes to go up against. 1-0 to Preston North End is what I've gone with in this one. Sheffield Wednesday versus Ipswich Town. in this day's edition of how many goals are Sheffield Wednesday going to lose by, I actually think it's going to be a relatively even game. I've gone nil pois, 1-0 to Ipswich Town. Stoke City versus Watford. I think Stoke are going to grind out another 0-0 draw against Watford. You never know which team of Watford is going to turn up this season. They've just not been consistent enough to really challenge for the playoffs all season. And therefore, that is why they're in 9th and probably will end up there come the end of the season, if I'm going to be brutally honest. I just think Watford are one of the teams that not totally sold on being able to get into the playoffs at the moment. I mean, with the new proposals for potentially going down to 8 teams, I think that will be not this season, but the season after. Then you can probably have a conversation. But at the moment, no. Down to 8th place rather. 6 teams, 8th place. Do let me know about your thoughts on that actually in the comment section down below about the proposal to increase the Championship playoff to 6 teams. West Bromwich Albion versus Hull City. Hull are an odd team. They've done enough to be able to get into the playoffs, but they don't seem to ever want to hold on to it. They've had 2 defeats, 2 wins, 2 defeats. That's the last 6 games, right? And I think maybe they get a draw up against West Brom. I think a good decision was to get rid of Eric Ramsey, and I think a 1-1 draw here. The damage may already have been done by making that stupid appointment in the first place. May well have been. They've appointed a person called James Morrison, by the way, as their manager. Not a clue why. And from what I can gather, he's only rarely ever been interim manager. I mean, what? I have absolutely no idea why James Morrison has been given the reins. Yeah, I think, presumably he's interim, no? There's no way that he's been made fully, otherwise that's another reckless decision. Lincoln City versus Stockport County. I've gone with another win for the Imps. You know, they just keep on getting them results. The best team in the league at the moment on form, and they're doing a darn great job. And Stockport aren't looking like a team playoff ready, if I'm going to be brutally honest with that. 2-1 to Lincoln City. Rotherham United versus Bolton Wanderers. I think Bolton might start taking the eye off the ball a bit. They're 6 points off second place, and I don't see Cardiff letting up enough points for Bolton to surmount that. And also, Bolton have played one more game for both Cardiff and Lincoln at the moment. So yeah, and the 10 points clear, 7th place. Reading, they're going to get playoffs, and they probably might start easing off into a bit of cruise control. And I think Rotherham, desperate for the points, 3 points off safety now. I think 3-1 to Rotherham United, I think, could pounce and capitalise on this opportunity. Doncaster Rovers versus Blackpool, 1 point separating these two teams. Home advantage, I think, will sway this one. 3-2 to Doncaster Rovers. What is going to be a very important game come the end of the season, I should imagine. Exeter City versus Cardiff City. I think Cardiff win this one. As I was saying earlier, Exeter haven't won in a long time. I think Cardiff get a 1-0 win in this game, keeping that pressure upon Lincoln. Leyton Orient versus Peterborough United. Peterborough haven't won a game in the last 4. Leyton Orient have won once in the last 6. It's got a bit of a hallmarks for me of a draw. 2-2 draw in this one. Yeah, I think fairly even games altogether. I suspect Leyton Orient do stay up come the end of the season. But yes. Mansfield Town versus Barnsley. 16th versus 12th, very much mid-table game, potentially. I think Mansfield need a few more points to be fully out of the woods. But you know what? I suspect they will come the end of the season manage to do it. I have faith that Nigel Clough will be able to do that. 2-1 to Mansfield over Barnsley in this one. back to winning ways for the Stags. Northampton Town versus Burton Albion. Another managerial sacking at Northampton, and this time it's Kevin Nolan, who is the victim of the latest sacking. Colin Calderwood has been made as interim manager. Don't know a huge deal about him. It's another roll of the dice, isn't it? And sometimes that's not always the greatest idea. I think Burton, who have done a few huge results so far this season, could come out with another one. 5-2 to Burton Albion is what I've gone with in this one. And that will probably be enough for them to stay up come the end of the season. Another season passed by and another season that Burton Albion somehow stay up in League One. Port Vale versus Huddersfield Town. I'm sorry, Port Vale, but you're going to lose this one. I mean, Huddersfield need the points in order to stay in the playoffs. And for that precise reason, I think Huddersfield run out 4-2 winners. Reading versus Plymouth Argyle. Two relatively decent teams, but Reading, I said earlier, are desperately on that hunt to get into the playoffs. And I think by the end of this week, they will be in them. As I think they win 2-0 over Plymouth Argyle. Stevenage versus AFC Wimbledon. Stevenage on a decent hot streak of form, and I think they continue that with a 2-1 win over AFC Wimbledon. Wigan Athletic versus Bradford City. It's hard to tell which team Bradford City are going to turn up with, but I think they're going to turn up with their winning shoes in this one and pass by Wigan with ease, winning 2-1 to the Bantams. Wycombe Wanderers versus Luton Town. 9th versus 11th. 6 points, though, is what separates them. There's a quite big buffer zone being built up in that sort of area of the table. But I do think Luton reduced that deficit a bit by winning this one 3-1. But if Wycombe do win this one, I wouldn't be surprised if they get to the playoffs come the end of the season. I'm still thinking that they are the most likely to actually get to the playoffs, which is odd saying that, seeing they're in 9th. But I think I'm looking at them and I'm liking what I'm seeing. Harrogate Town versus Salford City. In what has got to be one of the most obvious EFL sort of fixture of one which would make no sense of Harrogate to win, but they will. Put it this way, other than the last game, Harrogate were on a 5 games unbeaten streak and actually are doing their bit to make this league really competitive. 4 teams could possibly be relegated this season. And I think Harrogate know that and will... No. I mean, I was going to say they're going to win this one, but then I remember Salford City are in 6th, and there's a reason for it. Dupe you all. Sometimes I like doing that, build it up to see it like I'm going to get an upset win, and I'm going to say a scoreline like 2-0 to Salford City. It is funny to do that. It does troll you guys, like probably rage baits you as well. Sorry about that. In one of my favourite games in the footballing pyramid, though, has got to be Notts County versus Chesterfield. A lot of passion in this game. My one wish is for Notts County versus Chesterfield to be the playoff final and Chesterfield to win over Notts County and enact revenge that they did for that time when they were in the National League. That would be, well, beautiful. Will it happen? I'm not sure. But I've gone with a 2-1 win to Chesterfield in this, putting them back into the playoffs, I suspect. Because I do think there is a strong likelihood that Chesterfield get into the playoffs this season. Barnet versus Newport County. Well, you can't rule out Barnet from getting into the playoffs. They're only 3 points off. Though they're sort of been very hit and miss this season. Hence why I've been sort of a bit coy in suggesting it previously. And one of the reasons is that I think they're just going to get... It's just going to be like a 2-2 draw in this game. I think Newport County just pluck out a point in this one. And voila, it's suddenly improves the confidence at Newport all around. So yeah, Barrow versus Accrington Stanley. Accrington Stanley got nout to play for in this one. Only one win in the last 6 games, 4 defeats during that time. They've really just couldn't care less now. They've reached the point threshold that, you know what, they're going to stay up come the end of the season. They already know that. So yeah, they're not going to get to playoffs. So they're just sort of coasting. And I know Barrow haven't been great, but they're staring down the barrel of a gun. And I think they suspect that maybe getting a win in this one might be a vital 3 points in aiding their bid for safety. 2-0 to Barrow. Bromley versus Bristol Rovers. Got a sneaky suspicion Bristol Rovers might win this one. Bromley have dropped a fair few points. Not lose, to be fair, but in drawing terms. But it's very quickly from when you're going from a winning position to being drawing to then end up in the position where you're losing. It's all too quickly in a slippery slope. And I think 2-1 to Bristol Rovers as a result in this one. Cambridge United versus Gillingham. I think a bit similar to what I was mentioning earlier with Gillingham about their games against MK Dons. I also think they can maybe be the thorn in Cambridge's side in this one and win 2-0. There you go. Crewe Alexandra versus Walsall. Again, another huge point. A game rather in this one cannot be underestimated. 9th versus 11th. Walsall, if they get back-to-back wins, suddenly make themselves look right back into contention to get in that playoffs. And I think they do this week. I think it'll be the start of a good run of form for Walsall. 1-0 to Walsall in this one. Fleetwood Town versus Tranmere Rovers. Yeah. 14th versus 19th. Not a lot in this game. I think Tranmere Rovers recently sacked their manager, if I remember rightly, which was probably the right call to do, considering they are looking lost at the moment. I think it's fair to say. So yeah, they recently sacked their manager, and I think they're going to get a point in this one. It's maybe the start of a change in momentum. 0-0 draw is what I've gone with here. Oldham Athletic versus Grimsby Town. Grimsby, they've managed to get into the playoffs because of their good performances of late, and I think this continues up against an Oldham side who, okay, yes, are flipping phenomenal right now. I will accept that. Joint best in the form in the league with MK Dons. Can't really much get better than that, but it's hard to tell if Oldham are going to manage to mount a serious playoff charge. And I therefore think Grimsby might dash their hopes a bit. 2-1 to Grimsby Town. Shrewsbury Town versus Cheltenham. Great result from Shrewsbury last week as they managed to overcome Chesterfield 3-2. They've been actually really good recently, but so have Cheltenham have been relatively good as well. But no, I'm going to go with Shrewsbury in this one. 1-0. A narrow, even game overall, but two very strong teams. But you can't doubt Shrewsbury's attitude approaching games at the moment. Swindon Town versus MK Dons. Can Swindon get back into the top 3? Only 2 points off it. And an important game against MK Dons at that. If they win, we'll overtake them. And I think a 0-0 draw is what I'm predicting in this one. As with all huge games, I seem to predict. Wealdstone versus Solihull Moors. Yeah, Solihull Moors are an odd one, aren't they? In terms of they're in 12th. Haven't won in a while. Looking a bit down and outcast at the moment, and in a bit of a position that, but they're not really sure what they're doing at the moment. I think I'm fair with saying that. Chris Millington, I do rate as a coach, do not get me wrong, but yeah, I'm going to go with a 1-1 draw in this one. Another disappointing week, probably, for a Solihull Moors perspective. but they've got nothing to play for at the moment. Aldershot Town versus York City. I think the wrath of Aldershot strikes again as they managed to pick up a point in a 0-0 draw up against York. Yet again, meddling with the big boys, but then failing it up against the smaller teams. No offence to those teams in the relegation zone, that's just how the table is. Boston United versus Yeovil Town. Boston were doing really well until the last game. Yeovil have been wildly inconsistent and have just sort of been keeping a pace enough that they're not in danger of going down, but no aspirations beyond that. I am going to say, though, for this 3-1 to Yeovil Town. I think Boston go through definite spells. They have a great spell and then they have a bad spell, and I think we're about to see them entering their bad spell. Sorry, Boston fans. You are great. I have witnessed your atmosphere away from your away fans before, and they are really, really good. Brackley Town versus Woking. And Brackley, I think we're going to start seeing wins after wins after wins. And I'm going to have a huge win for Brackley here. 6-2. It's going to be the most nuts game of all time. Going to be beers are flowing in the crowd. Everyone at St James's Park will be absolutely delighted. Gateshead versus Sutton United. Gateshead are beginning to get a momentum, which is making people feel good around the club. And that's what is lovely to see. As you never want any toxicity around in a club, but it does happen, and there was some for such a long time at Gateshead. Well, now I think that positivity will continue as they're going to beat Sutton United at home in a hugely important game at the Gateshead International Stadium. 4-3 to the Heed. SC Halifax Town versus Boreham Wood. Can't say enough that this could be in the playoffs. It's currently 4th versus 7th. And Halifax, they're a team which, budget-wise, you maybe not expect to be in the playoffs. Historically-wise, maybe. But they're a decent enough team. They really are. They're a good team, Halifax. I've gone with a 2-1 win at Shea for the Shaman. As Boreham Wood get a nasty surprise in the north of England. Southend United versus Forest Green Rovers. Back-to-back wins now for Forest Green Rovers. Has their bad spell come to an end? I don't know. We're up against Southend, who did a decent job up against Carlisle United, a similar sort of size side as Forest Green Rovers. I think it's going to be a similar result again as well. 2-2 draw. It's almost going to be a replication of last Saturday's game in the later kickoff. I think it was last Saturday. Tamworth versus Carlisle United. Carlisle's woes, I think, are going to continue, I'm afraid. I think Tamworth managed to inflict a 1-0 defeat up against them. As I think Tamworth, 1-0 win to Tamworth. They're at home at the Lamb Ground. I just have this weird feeling that Carlisle are having a few disappointing results of late. Truro City versus Hartlepool United. A long stretch for Hartlepool to go down to Cornwall. And it's going to be a good one, right? Truro, they're down, out and buried. They've pretty much put their hands up and said, look, you know what? We accept that we're probably going to be relegated at this point. Interestingly enough, John Askey is the manager of Truro. And before he went to Truro, he was the manager of Hartlepool United. Yes, he has got history with Hartlepool. He wasn't there for long, really. I mean, it was a really odd one. Because, they probably shouldn't have given him I think it was a new contract when he was anyway. He tends to be a high-tempo manager, but it doesn't seem to be really working at the moment. 3-1 to Hartlepool is what I've gone with. 3-1. 3-1. That sounds about right. Hartlepool need to get back into that position where they can start combating for the playoffs again. They've just been too far off too many times this season, is the problem at the moment for the Monkey Hangers. Eastleigh versus Rochdale. Well, Eastleigh, for a lot of, for about 20 minutes of their match in the weekend against York City, look like they may cause earthquakes to go across the National League and cause an upset 1-0 win, but then they lost 3-1. But I think they will finally cause this seismic shift as they beat Rochdale 4-2. Just feeling it. Morecambe versus Braintree Town. Morecambe are probably absolutely delighted with, 5-0 in the end or something in their last game. Absolutely mental results. And it's given Morecambe all the confidence they need to think that they're going to get out of relegation zone. They're only 3 points off safety now, breathing down Brackley's neck. It's an important game as well against Braintree. Gateshead fans will be hoping for a draw, that's for sure, as I'm sure are Brackley fans. But I don't think that's how it's going to be transpiring. I think it's going to go 1-0 to Braintree Town. I think most people will probably be going the other way around, though. Scunthorpe United versus Altrincham. I know Alty haven't been too bad. 4 wins in the last 5 games now, which is a decent little collection. But I think Scunthorpe eventually need to get back to being a bit of a consistent side if they want to really make playoffs at the end of the season and have that momentum going into them. So I've gone with a 2-0 win for Scunthorpe United at Glanford Park. Alfreton Town versus Peterborough Sports. I've gone with another win for Alfreton. This is more of a must-win than Radcliffe because, both of these two teams are in the real mud. 1 point separating them is all that is between these two teams. And I'm just hoping that, let Alfreton win this one. 2-0 to Alfreton Town and what used to be known as North Street. I can never remember what they renamed it to. There was Footy McFootface was one of the suggestions in the fan consultation. Obviously, did not change their name to that. That would be funny, wouldn't it? Bedford Town versus Radcliffe. I'm hoping Radcliffe get back into form just at this weekend. Not quite before then, but just in time for this weekend. But I suspect, however, it will just be a really dull 0-0 draw, real mind-numbing stuff. Chorley versus Buxton. I can't back Buxton for a win at the moment. They're just looking far too inconsistent and unbothered for me. So 3-0 to Chorley. Curzon Ashton versus Macclesfield. I suspect Curzon Ashton could maybe get a point in this one. I can't tell you why, but I just think they're going to force a 2-2 draw up against Macclesfield. Darlington versus Leamington. I've gone with a win for Darlow in this one. A solitary 1-0 win. Leamington are beginning to worry a few of them teams at the top end of things, as they sort of seem to have woken up a bit too late from their slumber. So I'm sure Darlington fans will be hoping that they don't succumb to the latest Leamington upset. I think Fylde are going to be held to a point again in this upcoming weekends of footballing action, as I think they draw 3 apiece with Kings Lynn Town. Hereford versus South Shields. I think Hereford could shock even more than that, as I think Hereford are going to beat South Shields 3-0. Absolutely madness. I think there's going to be a mad weekend of football, as if you've not already managed to tell. Kidderminster Harriers versus Chester. I think Chester continue their good run of form and actually managed to put an end to Kidderminster Harriers' good run of form, as Chester will run out 2-1 winners. Marine versus Worksop Town. The ever unpredictable Marine, I think, will win this one. 2-1 to Marine. Merthyr Town versus Spennymoor Town. I've gone with a wild end-to-end game here. Merthyr Town 4, Spennymoor Town 6. If that does happen, right, there will be some video of me somewhere. I'll do something mental. But if that actually comes off, I'll do something mental. But yeah, should we just? I've still got a few crazies I think up my sleeve as well. Scarborough Athletic versus AFC Telford United. This one I don't think is going to be the most craziest game. I actually think it's going to be quite a narrow, low scoring. It's 5th versus 6th. It could really go either way, but I'm going to go with a narrow 1-0 win for Scarborough. Southport versus Oxford City in the next one. I mean, probably all honours even in this one, 16th versus 20th. Yeah, I'm going to go with a 2-2 draw in this game. Bath City versus Hornchurch. I think Hornchurch are going to get back into their stride at the moment, is what I'm predicting. And I'm going to go with another win for Hornchurch. 2-0 win over the team from the Roman city of Bath. Dorking Wanderers versus Ebbsfleet United. You know what? I think Dorking are having a bit of a tumble, and I think it's a perfect opportunity for Ebbsfleet to pounce on that. 4-1 to Ebbsfleet United is what I've gone with in this one. Dover Athletic versus Chippenham Town. If Chippenham win this, it could be absolutely mental. I mean, it's a must-win game, really, for Chippenham. It's against 17th place Dover, who haven't got anything left to play for. I think they might not be able to get a win, but I think they will get a point. I've gone with a 1-1 draw at the Crabble Ground. Eastbourne Borough versus Maidenhead. I'm sorry, Eastbourne, but I think the Isthmian League is beckoning you, and I therefore think Maidenhead will win this one. 2-1 to the Magpies. Enfield Town versus Dagenham and Redbridge. Enfield, I still think have got a little bit of hope in them, but it's gradually fading away. But maybe this is a local rivalry, let us not forget. And I think a 1-1 draw is what we're going to see in this one. Hemel Hempstead Town versus ASC Totem. Well, we saw last week Chelmsford come out with a massive result. This week, I think Hemel Hempstead will be the team to shock the pyramid and win this one. 8-1 over ASC Totem. I'm going with an absolutely mental prediction with that one. But again, we got a couple of mental ones this week. Horsham versus Tonbridge Angels. I think Tonbridge Angels win this one. They're 3 wins in 4 at the moment, which is better than Horsham's 1 win in 6. So, yeah, 2-0 to Tonbridge Angels. Maidstone United versus Farnborough. I think Farnborough get battered a bit in this one, I'm afraid to say. Yeah, 4-0 to the Maidstone United team from Kent. Slough Town versus Salisbury. I think we're going to see a relatively even game in this one. It's 15th versus 18th, and I think we're going to see a 1-1 draw in this game. Torquay United versus Chesham. Chesham on a really decent run of form. They've sort of faded that away a bit, but they're still hunting down for that playoff position, and it's a must-win game for them, I think, against Torquay. And the Torquay, it's a must-not-lose. But I think Chesham are going to win this one. 2-1 to Chesham United. I think Torquay are really faltering at the moment, and Chesham might be quite happy to play them now. Weston-super-Mare versus Hampton-Richmond Borough. As I predicted, Weston-super-Mare will have a superb week as they take on Hampton-Richmond Borough and win at home 3-1. Worthing versus Chelmsford City. I think it's going to be another draw for Chelmsford City in this one. I think I predicted their last game to be a draw, didn't I? So I've gone with a 1-1 draw in this one. Crystal Palace versus Leeds United. I do suspect Leeds are beginning to fade a bit back into that sort of dangerous area. It's now only 3 points above West Ham United. And I think Palace are now beginning to pick a few results here and there, you know. So I've gone with a 2-1 win for Crystal Palace. Manchester United versus Aston Villa. Aston Villa are really going off the boil. Man United, they're actually doing a decent job. Still not about 5 in a row nonsense that guy's wanting. But yeah, I think Man United win this one 2-0. Nottingham Forest versus Fulham. Come on, Fulham. Come on. I know you can win this game. I've gone for them to win 1-0. Come on, I really want it to happen. Liverpool versus Tottenham Hotspur. Spurs lost 5 in a row. I don't even know who the manager of Spurs is anymore. It's a complete car crash of a club. And I think Liverpool are going to inflict further blows to them. 5-1 to Spurs. Brentford versus Wolves. Wolves, can they actually do it? I mean, there is a world out there where somehow Wolves stay up, which would be absolutely mental. But I've gone with a 5-3 win for Brentford. Proper end-to-end, really exciting football match, actually. Portsmouth versus Derby County. We always seem to have a high game up against Portsmouth. We won 4-0 last season at home to Portsmouth. I think at one point we went to Portsmouth and conceded 6 or something like that. It's always a high-scoring game. I've gone with a 2-2 draw here, 4 goals in it. And Chelmsford City versus Slough Town. I've gone with a 3-1 win for Chelmsford City. Thank you very much for watching this video. I'll just go through. So long as there's not enough to get us relegated to League 2, a point deduction in League 1 could maybe potentially lead to good things for Sheffield Wednesday in the long term. Not sure how you figure that out. An argument that the -15s will be looked to build something and won't just plan to come straight back up, meaning better long-term development, e.g. hopefully buying young players to develop for a promotion push the season after. During the transfer years, there was little to no long-term plans. There was no proper guiding vision, but hopefully that will change with the new owner. Well, who is going to be the new owner? That's the question I've got, because your preferred bidder pulled out, right? That guy who did poker. Mike Ashley, I don't know if he's been announced as a preferred bidder. He will not be wanting to do any long-term building up the academy or stuff like that. He'll try and do cheap, quick fixes and try and get you up to the Premier League as quickly as possible and then just leave you floating there. But yes, if you are new around here, please do subscribe. We're trying to get to 250. Last time I checked, we were on 249. Just going to check quickly if we've managed to surpass that. I might do a special at 250. We'll see what the appetite is for it. But it's a huge goal that I have been working on for quite a while now, actually. Yeah, still on 249. So do click that subscribe button if you are new around here. Yes, I will catch you all in the next one. But goodbye for now.